And I want to welcome everyone to not Sandra Hensel. She's on someone else's computer. This is Victoria Ligon, and she is here with us from which MTSS team are you on? You're on MTSS Behavior?
On the behavior.
There are 4 MTSS teams, and she is on the behavior team. Do you want to tell us a little bit, Victoria, about what you do before you begin?
Okay, I work in the behavior department, and what we do is we go into the different schools and support the schools in putting in behavior systems. The 2 we put in are PBIS and restorative practices. And today we're going to be talking about restorative language, which is right in with our restorative practices systems.
Perfect. Do you need me to make you co-host, or I will go ahead and do that?
I have a share screen.
There you go. Then you're good.
Right. And we have a couple of sessions where we'll be breaking into groups. So do I just tell you when we get ready to break into the groups?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll only have at the most 4 groups.
Okay.
How many people do we have here today in this session?
We are sitting at 29. So 27 if you don't count you and me.
Okay, that's good. So you just tell me when we're ready and we'll take it from there.
We're good to go.
Okay. Now it might take me a minute to find the screen. Here we go.
You're a pro at this.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put it on present so it's a little easier. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about restorative language in general, and then we're going to see if we can take that into the classroom. Now, let's see. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to go over some basics of restorative practices, and then we're going to talk about language, because it doesn't do any good to talk about restorative language if we don't understand at least a little bit about restorative practices. So the basic premise, and this is from the IIRP, which is the Restorative Institute that worked with JCPS for a couple of years. It was founded by Ted and Susan Wachtel, and their basic premise is that restorative practices with human beings, that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. And since we are teachers, we are the person in authority in most of the situations that we deal with in our schools. And Sandra has a mouse. I'm not used to using the mouse. I'm used to just using the touch pad, and so I'm going back and forth here. The aim of restorative practices is to develop community and to repair conflict and tensions by repairing harm in relationships. So we're going to talk a lot about community and relationships, because one of the aims of using restorative language is to build up those relationships, and which in turn builds up our community. So this is our restorative blueprint, and these are the components of restorative practices. Today, we're going to be talking about the restorative language, but we're going to dip a little bit into the social discipline window because it goes with our aim and our basic premise. So here's the social discipline window. It's a 4-pane window. And on the bottom, you have support, and on the side, you have control. So this is a window that's going to talk about both control and support, which is what we need as a teacher and what we need in all of our relationships. So if you look at the control, we have high control, and you think of high control, a lot of times that's when you do things to people. And if you go back to the basic premise, doing things to people is not what we're going to try to aim for. Remember, we're trying to aim for with. And a lot of times people think of doing things to people as punitive. I'm going to give you an example. When I was in a school in Jefferson County, I was doing a split position. I had high school in the morning and middle school in the afternoon, which a lot of our special area teachers have. The afternoon principal decided he wanted me full-time at his school. And instead of taking me into his office and having a conversation with me, he pretty much started talking, and he ended up screaming by the end of the conversation. And he had a 2 conversation with me. And needless to say, I didn't stay at his school full time because I thought, well, if he's going to scream at me when he wants me there, what's he going to do when I'm there full time? So that's more of a 2 conversation. A 4 we think of is more of a permissive. My mother was a 4 type of personality. I had a handicapped sister who had Down syndrome, and she did a lot of things for my sister. And don't get me wrong, she was a wonderful mother with my sister. Um, and she taught her a lot of things, but she also did a lot of things for her that my sister could have learned to do on her own. The next one is a not type of way of handling and communicating with people. And that is when you're very low in control and you're low in support also. And we all have seen teachers like that. You walk into their classroom and they might be sitting in their room. They're not really doing anything. Their class management, the kids are running all around the classroom. They're not teaching anything. So we definitely are trying to stay out of that not window. And the with window is where we want to try to live most of the time. We're going to visit some of the windows occasionally, and sometimes it's actually productive to visit the 2 window and productive to visit the 4 window, but the with window is where we want to stay. And the with window is high in control and high in support. So one example that I have for the with window is I was a principal in 2 prisons. And one day we had an inmate who put a canned good in a sock, and he swirled it around, and he ended up hitting one of our officers, and he injured the officer, and the officer had to go to the hospital. Well, that night, a lot of my teachers and I had nightmares about being attacked in the prison or just different things happening in the prison. And we went in the next day, and my nightmare was that I was having one of my teachers build some type of weapon for me so that I could defend myself and the teachers in the prison. Well, my deputy warden heard that I was building a weapon, and she called me up to her office. Now, I remembered the conversation that my principal had with me, and I wondered if I was going to get the same treatment and be screamed at for a half an hour. But she called me in and she says, "So what's going on?" And she started asking me, and she found out that it was just a dream that we had all been talking about our dreams because of the incident. And we had a very good conversation. A lot of really good things came from that conversation. So that's more of a with conversation because she listened to me. She tried to understand what was going on without putting any judgment whatsoever in that conversation. So that's where we want to live. We want to live in that with window. So in the restorative world, in language, now we're going to switch to the language. We're going to talk about restorative communication, positive communication, affective language, and we might hit on a little bit of the restorative questions. It just depends on how much time we have. So what is communication? And I'm going to have some of you all answer that before we go on to the rest of it. So I want to hear what you think communication is. And you can unmute, just speak out. What is communication?
Sharing.
Sharing? Absolutely. Anything else?
Listening.
It could
Absolutely.
be nonverbal,
Nonverbal?
like thumbs up or high five, or
Absolutely. Right. So I looked in the dictionary, and this is what it said communication was. Communication is the process of sending and receiving messages through verbal and nonverbal, which we talked about. More simply, communication is said to be the creation and exchange of meaning. So that's what we're talking about. So the next question is, how do you teach others to communicate? Or how do you think others learn from you how to communicate?
Through
Could be your
observation and
body
communicating
language.
with you.
Through observation, absolutely. And what was the second? I couldn't hear the second person.
Through a person's body language.
Right? Through nonverbals again. Any other ways you teach people to communicate?
Norms and standards.
Right. In our classrooms, we have expectations and norms and procedures. And so we teach them to communicate through that. If you think about the different things that teachers do, we're teaching communication almost all day long, right? Because communication is, every behavior is a form of communication, even behaviors that require disciplinary action. Really, everything that you do in your classroom is some type of communication. If you're standing still and not really communicating with the students, you're still communicating with them. If you're smiling at them or if you're talking to them, it's all communication. So restorative communication is conscientious communication, being aware of everything that we say and we do. I have 3 kids that are in their 20s, and I have realized through working in this department that even though I don't mean the tone of voice that I use a lot of times, sometimes I flip into a tone of voice that's kind of snippy with my kids. And I don't mean it in a snippy way. It's just when I'm presented with I have to figure out how to do something, my mind is thinking, but my voice is talking kind of snippy. And I'm trying really hard to correct that. And it's so hard to correct because it's a response. And responses are really hard to correct. It's something that you can't plan for as much as, like, if I'm planning a speech, I can plan out how I'm going to deliver that speech. But a reaction type of response is harder to plan out. And so I'm consciously trying to be aware of how I present things when my mind is busy thinking about something else. So there's 4 components of restorative communication. But before I talk about those, kind of going along with what I talked about with the conscientious communication, communication is not just the way we talk, not just that snippiness or the pleasantness in your voice. It's not limited to only one setting in our school. It's not just when you're up delivering your content, and it's not a one-time only concept. Communication is what we do all the time in our classroom, all the time when we're talking to different staff members. It's constantly, your communication is 24/7. So our first component of communication is relationships. How you build relationships. Are you building positive relationships that build people up and build a tighter connection between you and that person? Or are you building negative relations that degrade relationships so people want to stay away from you and don't want a relationship with you? Communication is one of the things that you can use to help build those tight relationships. So if you have students in your classroom that you're wondering, I wonder why I can't seem to build a relationship with that student, you might want to go back and examine your conscientious communication and see what you're doing and how you're doing it with that student, and re-examine it to see if there's something that you could do differently that would help build a positive relationship. Or if you have students that you have good relationships with, you might want to examine and say, what am I doing? What is my tone of voice? What is my face saying? What's my body saying? And that way you can take that positive stuff that you do and transfer it to other students that you want to build a better relationship with, and see if that will help build those relationships. And remember that all components of restorative communication start with the principle of relationship. Right now, I would like for us to divide into groups, and we're going to divide into 4 groups. And I'd like for you to discuss explicit examples of both positive and negative communication. So think about, it doesn't just have to be in the classroom. And when you're talking about your examples, make sure that they're what I call light and fluffy examples, that it's nothing too serious that somebody doesn't want to hear. But I want you to talk about positive and negative communication that you've had in your classroom or something that you've just had in everyday life. And we're just going to spend about 5 minutes on that. And when we come back, if possible, I'd like for a couple of people to share their examples of positive and negative communication. And when you talk about that, try to think of all the different ways that we communicate, both verbally and nonverbal. Mimi, are you ready?
I am. I'm getting ready to create them now. So everybody understands
Okay.
what's going on, correct? Give me a thumbs up. All right. You're going to have a little sign that says that the rooms are open and you've been moved to a room. Looks like we have a few people left. Now we know who's not paying attention, right? So I appreciate you presenting with us today. We had a great first session and this session is going well. We've got 21 sessions this week.
Oh my gosh. That took a lot of coordination, Mimi.
Oh, yes. It's and I have so your validation question that you gave me, that's how they get credit. So even these people that are just kind of hanging here and unfortunately aren't paying attention, when I posted at the end, everybody that completes the validation question, that's how I do on PD Central, because I've got some people that show up that aren't really on here. I am going to go ahead and pop in a couple of rooms.
Okay. I'll just wait for you to give me the okay, and I'll start on the next slide.
Okay.
Okay.
It got a little better, but anyway, that's my examples of positive and negative communication I've had in the last year.
Everybody okay in here?
We're good, Mimi.
Okay, I'm going to pop in other groups.
Ready?
Eye contact really is huge.
Yes, because well, you know, but it also depends on too, because culturally, some people don't like eye contact. So you might have to find a different way to be positive. Because I have found that when I've tried to talk to kids and ask them to look at me, so I know that they understand what I'm saying, they still have a tendency to.
Hey, everyone, you guys doing okay?
Yep.
Sam, what does your hat say?
Ooh, good question. It says steelhead fishing gear. My friend got me this in Oregon. He's a big fisherman. I am more of a fisher than I am a catcher, I guess.
All right, I'm going to hop back out into a different group.
Become leaders inside of the classroom. Okay, girl. They become leaders inside of the classroom to demonstrate their game. So that communicates an opportunity for them to lead, presentation skills, because they have to understand it and know it for themselves in order to lead within the classroom. And it's
So I just gave them the 1 minute to go signal.
Okay. So how long does this, I mean, how many days is your HPE Institute?
It's all 5 days this week.
Oh, okay.
Look, we got 12 seconds left. Okay, we're back.
Okay. So do we have anyone who would like to share out and talk about an example of positive or negative or both communication?
Yeah, this is Coach Johnson. I'll go. In our group, we talked basically about NTI. You know, it was really different last year, teaching on the computer, kind of like what we're doing now. But anyway, positive, I would say when the kids had their camera on and they were looking at the camera, you know, they were focused. But we, you know, with my group at my school, the special area teachers developed norms and standards, and the kids would have to raise their hand or they would have to put their fingers up by their ears. And then that means they would have a question. And sometimes they would have to wait. And most of the kids did a pretty good job at that. But in my group, we talked about, you know, with nonverbal, you know, some of the kids would turn their camera off, and, you know, we didn't know really if they were there at times or not. So that was probably a form of, you know, bad communication. And then you always had kids that were on bunk beds, jumping around, putting on a show. And there was a couple circumstances where I had to talk to teachers and parents about the norms and what the kid has to do to be able to come to an NTI classroom for PE or health. You know, but those are some of the things we talked about. And then I had a little girl that, you know, it didn't matter what I did every day. I'd start presenting and she turned her microphone on and we would hear all the background noise. You know, and that got a little bit better after talking to her teacher and her parents, but, you know, it got a little better, but she still did it. But, you know, that's something, you know, that you battled every day with NTI and with kids getting online.
Absolutely. And I have a question for you. When the child kept her microphone on and you battled that, how did that make you feel?
Well, she was a kindergartner, so I was very patient with her.
Uh-huh.
And it was almost to the point where it would happen every day, but I was very patient and, you know, very kind to her. But I could see me giving her reminders that I wasn't going to get anywhere. So I talked to her teacher and she was doing the same thing in other classes too. And then, you know, it got a little better, but, you know, she came a long way. It got a little better towards the end as we went back to school, but, you know, she was young. I mean, she's 5 years old. I mean, you know, just want to turn her button on and let everybody hear what she had to say and what her family was saying in the background. So anyway.
Right. And so I'm going to ask one more time because we haven't hit, how did it make you feel? And I know you were patient with her, but how did it make you feel when day after day her button was still on?
Well, it was frustrating, but, you know, I couldn't show it to
Frustrating.
her that I was frustrated or to the rest of the kids.
Right. Okay. Because we're going to hit on that in a minute. So I wanted to touch that first. So that was an example of negative communication to you, right?
That's right.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that example. I appreciate that because we might use that just a little bit when we talk about affective statements. Anybody else before we go on?
Oh,
Can I make a request that people go ahead and turn their cameras on so I can see your faces here? I would really appreciate it through this if everybody keeps their cameras on for me. Thank you.
It looks like Jenny might be walking on the treadmill there.
Jenny
I
is
need to-
walking on the treadmill.
I know, Jenny, I need to kind of take your example and maybe start doing some of that during some of the
I'm on my
NTS.
bicycle and I practice what I preach.
I like that, Jenny.
Right? But I do have a negative and a positive. A negative communication with myself would be, you know, I have a lot of energy, and I sometimes come across to a parent or a child aggressively, the way that I walk, my mannerisms. So I have to work on that all the time. A positive would be communication for me would be eye contact, but someone in our group did bring up that there are different cultures that you don't, communicate
Right.
eye to eye, you don't look at someone. So
Right. Thank you for those, Jenny, because that's kind of the consciousness that I have to have with my tone of voice with my kids. And I don't mean my tone of voice is like really negative. It's just that mother snippiness, like, why'd you do that? And I don't mean it like that tone of voice that comes out. So I know exactly what you mean.
well,
Okay, so we're gonna
I'm really loud, and so the first thing I say to my kindergartners when they come to school is, Ms. Zender doesn't hear well. She's very loud. Don't be scared. That kind of thing. I have to say that because some of them really are afraid of me, but I have such a large gym and I speak really loud and I'm moving all the time, and so I really have to practice that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jenny. So we're going to go on and we're going to talk about recognition. And recognition is really the difference between what somebody does and what somebody is. And we just want to remember that behavior is something that people do, but everyone has a value regardless of what behavior they do. And in discipline, in the world of discipline, sometimes that's very difficult because we think of the child as what they do instead of thinking the child as who they are, and they're doing something that we don't like. So it's and I've been in the classroom for many years, and I've taught at some very challenging schools, and it's really hard when you have a child that day after day comes in and they're doing something that they know they're not supposed to do. And it's very difficult to keep reminding yourself that that child is not their behavior. That child is a person of value, but their behavior is something different that maybe is not acceptable to you. The next R is respect, and that is understanding your own triggers, like Jenny was talking about, like I was talking about. Recognizing that our triggers make respectful communication difficult, and reaffirming our own dignity. I think as an adults, most of us probably know what a lot of our triggers are, maybe not all of our triggers, but one of the things that we can do with our students is help them understand what their triggers are and teach them different behaviors to handle their triggers so that they start learning respect for themselves and respect for others. We may not respect what a person says or does, but we can be respectful in a way in the way that we communicate with them and about them. And the last R is responsible. And responsible, and we all know what responsible is. Each individual is responsible for understanding how their communication could impact others. And Jenny, I'm going to use you as an example again. Jenny knows that her voice is loud and she's very energetic, and she knows that she can impact especially younger children in a way that she doesn't want to impact them. So she tries to adjust a bit, and she tries to explain her natural behavior to the students so that they understand her and they're not afraid of her, versus some people don't understand how their behavior impacts others, and it creates a lot of tense moments if you don't understand how your relationship impacts another person. So we're going to go on to positive communication. Behavior specific praise is an example. I'm hoping that you have heard from our behavior department or had classes in behavior specific praise. That is when you praise a child, or doesn't have to be a child, even a friend. I mean, around here, we adults, we praise each other and use that. But it is when you call out the specific behavior that a child is doing, and then you add a praise onto that. So for example, you might say, Carla, I really like the way you put the balls up into their home, and thank you very much for that. So you're just mentioning the behavior and you're adding some type of praise to go along with that. Positive communication is both verbal and nonverbal. A very nice comment is the positive communication. Nonverbal positive is you look at a person with a pleasant face, or you don't stand with your arms crossed, you know, your arms are open. So both of those are positive communications. And non-specific praise is just, well, thank you for doing that. You're not really saying what that is, but you're still adding a nice praise. You're just not like behavior specific praise, you're adding what the person did, and non-specific, you're not really adding that element to it. So now we're going to go on to affective statements, and this is in particular a restorative tool, and it gets into, I don't know if you've heard of nonviolent communication, but it is a way to speak to people without using judgment. And so it combines both of those disciplines into this. So an affective statement is a personal expression of feelings in response to specific positive or negative behaviors of others. It includes I statements. It's creating an understanding for those who misbehaved or who misbehaved of the impact of the hurtful behavior. Let me read that again. Creating an understanding for the one who misbehaved of the impact of the hurtful behavior. So what that means is maybe the child who's misbehaving and they don't understand how their behavior is hurting someone. So affective statements come in and tell that person how it impacted another person. It is separating the deed from the doer, like we talked about already, and it's teaching empathy and the language of emotion. Now, why do we use these? There's a lot of positives that can come from affective statements. One, it helps us set boundaries. It provides feedback to the person who we're talking to or who has done something that maybe has hurt someone's feeling. It teaches empathy, and it is a way for relationships to be more humane. There's 4 elements of this, and we're going to practice this. The first is observation. The second one is we identify the feelings that come along with that. That's why I asked earlier how it made you feel, Coach, when their mic was on the whole time, and the whole time you're trying to teach, you hear background. You're going to put a request in there and then what your need is. So I want you to look at this picture, and I want you to think, what do you think when you see something like this? How do you feel? Is this positive? Is this exactly what your students, you want them to do? And if you wanted to make a comment to your group, what would you comment to your group that would tell them exactly what they're doing, how you feel about it, and what they need to do in the future? So this is where affective statements come in. So remember, we're talking about observation, feelings, needs, and request. So an observation is, it's non-judgmental. It's actually just telling a person what you observe. What are we observing that others are either saying or doing? What are people doing that we either like or don't like? It's non-evaluative and it's non-judging. So in this scenario, my observation might be when I see everyone participating, because to me, it looks like everybody's doing exactly what the teacher wants them to do. Now I'm going to go on to feeling. My feeling would be, if I'm this teacher and all my students are doing exactly what I want them to do, It's making me happy. And your feeling might be a different feeling, but it's probably a positive feeling. My need in this situation is for everyone to participate and follow the rules. So I'm happy because I need us all to be following the expectations, and that's what you all are doing. And my request would be to keep up the good work. So your affective statement would be, when I see you all participating, it makes me feel good because I need all of us to follow the rules and expectations, and that's what you're doing. So keep up the good work. So that would be an affective statement. You're bringing all the four ends: the observation, the feeling, the need, and the request. And we call these the O, F, N, R, the first letter of each one. But affective statements don't just have to be positive, they can be corrective. So what do you think about when you see this picture? If I were you, the first thing I would think about is, darn, I wish I had a weight room like that in JCPS. Or I wish I had some football players with legs like that, because I might win the state tournament then. But the other thing that you might be thinking is, look at all those weights on the floor. And I know I've told you all that when you finish working out, you need to put the weights back up. So to use an affective statement in this situation, your observation might be, when I see equipment all over the room, because that's non-judgmental, that's just an observation that you have, what kind of feeling are you going to have? I get really frustrated, and I think that was the word that Coach used when he talked about the background noise. Your need is going to be something like, because I need the classroom to be safe and organized for everyone. And your request is probably going to be something like, put the equipment back on the racks or back where they belong. So let me see how much time we have left. We have enough time to do this exercise. So we're going to divide into 4 groups, and I want you to look at the pictures here. So if you're going to comment on, or you're going to come up with a scenario of what you think the picture is, and you're going to create an affective statement to go along with that picture, just like I did with the other 2 pictures. So if you're in group 1, you have picture 1. If you're in group 2, you have picture 2. If you're in group 3, you have picture 3. And if you're in group 4, you have picture 4. So let's go through those real quick, because Mimi, will they know what group they're in? Or are they just going to be random like before?
They'll be in the same group that they were in before. So you will be, if you were in group 1 before, you'll be in group 1 again.
Okay, so look at your picture right now and think what you think that picture means, because it can mean different things to different people. Like, for example, picture 4, somebody could have actually hit the boy with that ball on purpose, or he could have been playing dodgeball in class and just accidentally got hit. So whatever the scenario to you is, you're making up that scenario. And then your task is to, 1, figure out an observation. When I see this, a feeling, it makes me feel this way. A need, because I need safety, or I need whatever it is that you need in that situation. And 4, your request for that student to do. Okay? So
Okay,
Mimi, I think we're,
yeah,
go
if
ahead.
you were in a group with BJ and Courtney, you were group 1. If you were in a group with Eduardo and Sweezy, you're group 2. Jamie Powell and Christopher Bayan's group was group 3, and Dan and Diosdado's group was group 4. So I'm sending you back to those same ones. You'll see it right now. Does everybody understand? Give me a thumbs up.
And we only need about 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll some of our groups. We'll have one member from each group report back to what you think, what your affective statement is when we come back.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Okay, so I have that you're going to end at 10:55 and I'll drop that question then. And I will give
Right.
you access to your question. I'll go ahead and give you
Okay.
access to your answers now.
Okay. And the video is going to cut off at 10:55, is that correct?
No, the video won't cut off at 10:55. At 10:55, I'll ask you to wrap it up and I'm going to post a validation question. And I just shared the link to the responses and they will all give their responses. That's how they get their PD credit.
Okay, so do I need to give them the link or did you
Nope,
put it in
I'll
the
do
chat?
that for you. I
Okay,
just
great.
shared it with you so you could get the responses after it's finished.
Okay. And what do you want me to do with those?
Just for your records if you want them.
Okay,
Some
good.
people like to see the feedback that they get from their sessions. So,
Yeah,
so,
I'd
thi-
like to see that.
so this will be feedback from your session.
Okay, that's great.
The question that you posed was, how can you incorporate restorative language into your daily communications with your students or fellow staff?
Very good. So they're going to come back. We're going to talk about this and then I'm just going to do the conclusion because we don't have very much more time.
Okay. I'm going to pop into a couple of rooms.
Okay.
If that was the teacher holding up the hand, I would say that she's frustrated. What about you, BJ?
I would say she was pretty angry.
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
Maybe the need could be to maybe just to make sure that they're staying safe as they're doing them, maybe, and then the request could be Theo's continue to stay on task. I don't know.
Keep moving under control.
How you guys doing?
We got the hard one.
Which
We don't
picture?
know what's going on in the picture. Like we all have different views of it.
I didn't pay
The third
attention to which picture it was. Let me go out and let me,
Joey
look.
took a picture of it because I knew I'd forget it.
Good
So it
idea.
looks like somebody's being chased.
But we don't know if it's like they're playing a game or somebody's hogging a ball, or we don't know if it's a good picture or a bad picture.
So I'm going to say, go from the angle that it's a bad picture, that somebody's being chased. How about that?
Gotcha.
What would you all say to that?
I saw the same thing. Yeah, I agree that I thought someone was being chased. So my observation to that was, if someone is chasing you and you have an object, you should stop and at least see what they need or share that object with them, depending on what the game is or how things are going. But at a minimum, you should at least stop and address that person who's running behind you or after you.
And see, Mimi, I saw it as a positive. Of course, you know, I teach at the all girls school. I saw it as a positive as boys and girls were playing together. And I love that the girl, you know, had the ball and the boy was
Yeah.
trying to chase her.
Well, I could have
I
been
saw it
completely
like that.
wrong.
I don't know. That was our confusion. So it's just, you know, how we see it and we don't know what's going on.
I flipped a mental coin and chose bad. I flip a mental coin a lot. Okay, I'm going to get back
My
out
thing
here.
could be, could you clarify what in the world is going on?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Looks like everyone is back out of the breakout rooms now. Sandra, Victoria. I see Sandra.
Okay, great.
Call you Sandra.
That's okay. Do we have a person who would like to give the effective statement for scenario number 1?
Everybody make sure you're muted for me.
So someone from group number 1, would you please give us your effective statement?
I was in group 1 and we only got through the observation, feeling, need, and request. We really didn't come up with an effective statement.
Okay, so can you give us that?
The observation, it could be a teacher that is frustrated with the student because she's not participating. She's got her hands up, counting to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, giving her X amount of time. The feeling was frustration or anger.
Okay.
And then the need, we said, was maybe, you know, BJ, what did you say about the need? The need was like, because he put it really good.
Okay. So we're gonna, I'm just gonna we only have 2 minutes, so I'm gonna just add a few things to that. So like a statement would be, when I see you turn your back and not participate in class, it frustrates me. Your need would be, I need you to participate in class. I'll give you to the count of 5. And well, your need is, it gets really difficult, need and request. I need everyone to participate in class, and your request would be, would you please come and join the class? Something like that.
Okay.
And we don't have enough time to go through the other scenarios. Sorry that we were a little late getting started. But anyway, so those different scenarios, you can see how you could use that a lot in your classroom. But we're going to go to the final slide here, which is conclusion. And very quickly, I think I have maybe 1 minute left. I want you to think about doing things with your students instead of 2 or 4, and that every behavior is a form of communication, even behaviors that require disciplinary action. Remember the 4 R's: relationship, recognition, respect, responsibility. Affective statements are personal expressions of feelings in response to specific positive or negative behaviors of other. And the 4 components of affective statements are observe, feeling, need, and request. And that wraps our time up. It should be 10:55 on my phone. Mimi, is that what you have?
It does. I am getting ready to post the validation question in the chat. But if you guys, in the meantime, if you guys have questions for Victoria, if you go ahead and ask now. Again, I just posted the question in the chat. If you are new to this, if this is your first one, all you have to do is click on this link and it's going to take you to a Google form and you will fill it out, and I will give you credit for this PD session during my lunch break. I'm trying to do this as quickly as I can, this part. If you are having trouble with the Google form, you need to put it in the chat that you need me to email it to you, and I will. Victoria, anybody have questions for Victoria?
And Mimi, I would like to say one thing first. I really appreciate you having me today. And I know as teachers, we get bombarded with things, and I hope that you can find something from this that you can take away. But thank you for having me today. And thank you all for your participation.
I think this is something that we all need to revisit because we all have our just initial responses to things. We see that picture and we place ourselves in those scenarios.
Absolutely.
Are there any more resources for PBUS in PE? Chris wants to know.
Are there any more resources in PBIS for PE?
Yeah.
We generally just have general things, but I can actually look for specific things for PE. And would I just send those to you, Mimi?
You could, yes, that would be perfect.
Okay. Okay, I'll see if I can find some additional PE specific. I created this just for PE, but usually it's just more for everyone. But I'll look.
I appreciate it. Anybody else have questions that you can ask or put in the chat? Frank, did you have your hand raised? Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought I saw your hand raised. I could be wrong.
Okay.
Again, I'm going to post the question one more time. The way that you get your PD for this hour is to go in and fill out the form. If you did not register on PD Central, as long as you fill this out, I can tell that you're here.
Gotta be another one somewhere. Where's that?
No, we don't have.
We got like 4 of them. I don't think they were.
Yeah, it's been pretty chilly. I mean, I just came from a while, so I don't feel it, but.
Right. I'm pretty insulated.
Well, Victoria, I want to thank you again for agreeing to participate and present with us. We really appreciate it having you. This is the second year row you've been with us, so we really want to thank you. And hopefully we'll have you back next year. Oh, you're on mute. Bye, guys. I'm going to turn off the record.